It's Two on the Aisle with me, Charles Grouse. Tonight, Leslie Hoban Blake joins me for reviews of Mrs. Warren's Profession, Brief Encounter, and Avenue Q. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Two on the Aisle. Good evening. I am the aforementioned Charles Grouse.
And I am the aforementioned Leslie Hoban Blake.
Right. But we don't see you, Leslie. Ah, there you are. Okay. And, well, our first show of the new season, if you consider the season beginning in, starting in September or October. And a lot is happening in the theater.
A lot.
So we'll get right to it. Mrs. Warren's Profession.
George Bernard Shaw.
Yes, one of my favorites. Directed by...
Doug Hughes.
Who directed Cherry Jones in Doubt.
In Doubt.
Yes, yes. And Cherry Jones in this play brings two icons together that I never thought I'd see, say, in the same breath. George Bernard Shaw and Mae West.
Okay.
Yes. Well, she plays Mrs. Kitty Warren, and she plays her as Mae West with a Cockney accent. And it got me to thinking, Mae West would have been fabulous in this.
You know, you're right, and I never thought of it. You're absolutely right.
Until I saw Cherry Jones do this, I never thought of it either.
Yeah.
But she's playing a former working girl who moved into the management of her profession. Think of her as a Victorian Miss Mona from Best Little Whorehouse.
Okay.
But like many women who have professional lives, it has separated her from her family, namely her daughter Vivi. And Vivi is now grown up, college graduate, and they are to have a reunion of sorts on a weekend in the country.
Well, there was just a slight oversimplification there, which is like many working women. She was separated from her because she didn't want her daughter to know what it was she did for a living.
Yes.
So she gave her daughter the best of everything, but except herself.
Right.
So that's,
And now she wants to change this.
Yeah, right. And that's where the problems begin.
And Vivi is now a professional. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned problems, because this is a very problematic play. Because the basic plot here is, well, is prostitution any worse than the other professions available to women at the time? Or, for that matter, being married? And I have to say, Shaw gives marriage a very bad name in this play, because half the characters want to marry either Kitty or Vivi. But not exactly for the most...
But these are topics that he's come back to many times. I mean, certainly the plight of women. He was very much a feminist in a time when feminism didn't even have a name. Right. And so he was very pro women doing these things. And Vivi is a fabulous character to be in the forefront of feminism. She's a...
Yes, she's an independent woman. She has a job. She's a partner in a business. She's a college graduate, one of the top students in her class. So definitely a modern woman, certainly by today's standards, but certainly by standards of the late early 1900s. Right. But that's not I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
But they're basically, Mrs. Warren, you're right, does not want her daughter. By the way, we never do find out about Mr. Warren, do we?
No. Well, there's all sorts of hints that Mr. Warren could be. That Vivi might actually be the daughter of somebody who's in the play as well.
Several people in the play, one of whom actually wants to marry her.
Yes. Well, no, yes. Right, exactly. Which is an awkward situation at best.
Yes, they really don't go very far with it.
Right.
But they do hint. But here's the thing. Vivi is saying, okay, Mom, I'm okay with your profession, but she's not. Mrs. Warren is saying, I'm okay with my profession, but she's really not, because she doesn't want Vivi anywhere near it, although she's very happy to share the profits. Vivi is not happy at all with what her mother, and when she finds out that her mother is still involved in it, she wants absolutely no part of her mother's money and no part of her mother. And that pretty much is how the first act ends. The second act is essentially a rehash, and I don't think Shaw really had his heart in this, because he never makes the argument for prostitution, if that indeed is what he was trying to do.
I don't think that's what he was trying to do. I think he was trying to show that there was so little available to women that this was the best of the bad lot, that she could do well
but
at.
You know what? He doesn't even quite prove that argument, and there's nothing added except for some very nice sets in the second act that we didn't already resolve more or less in the first act.
Which is, I think, what you call padding. I think the play is padded. Yes. I think it's really probably a long one-act rather than a two-act play. Sets, we got 4 gorgeous sets from Scott Pask, and we got beautiful direction from Doug Hughes. I think it's interesting that you brought up Mae West. Yes, now I see that when you say that, I see maybe that's what Cherry Jones was doing. I may be pilloried for saying what I'm going to say, but I didn't like Cherry Jones in this play. And I've loved Cherry Jones in just about everything she's ever done. And I thought she was just doing a generic Cockney woman.
Well, that's another thing. You know, you would think that someone who was eager to integrate herself into society would have gotten rid of the Cockney accent.
Well,
you know, maybe visit a certain Wimpole Street professor with the initials HH.
Interesting. Well, Shaw should have thought of that one. But I think the whole idea was that then he wouldn't have had the subplot with Vivi not wanting to be with her mother. Then they would have found a way to make the mother more palatable for Vivi, and that would have been the wrong thing to do there.
So you're thinking she needs the Cockney accent
she has to keep her right. She has to keep her working class roots for that. But the other thing is that I have to say that Sally Hawkins, who is this incredible British actress who last year won the Golden Globe Award in Mike Leigh's Happy-Go-Lucky on the screen, is the most wonderful Vivi I've ever seen. You know, we have seen these plays several times, a lot of us have, and I think in that wonderful series of the readings of
George Bernard Shaw?
The George Bernard Shaw readings over at downtown, that I've seen that at least twice being done there. So I've seen it a lot, and I think that this is the best Vivi I've ever seen. Perhaps because she's the most modern.
That could be. I liked her too, but it occurred to me those two really don't strike me as mother and daughter.
Well, it's an accident of birth. I mean, there's no nurture there. She had no upbringing.
Even the physical resemblance.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, there's got to be something that was
no.
passed
You
on.
look at my brothers and sisters, and we don't resemble each other.
Really?
No, I don't see that. My son doesn't look like me. I mean, there's a interesting, and it's a wise son who knows his own mother.
Does he have any of your gestures or anything that would?
I don't think so. I think he's worked very hard not to.
I think if you had an outsider take a look, they might link.
You're right. They don't look a thing alike, but that didn't bother me. And then we don't know who the father is, as you said. But I just thought that, I think Doug Hughes did a lovely job, as I said before. And acting-wise, there are 2 other people I'd like to mention, Ed Hibbert and Mark Harrelick.
Right, Hibbert as one of Mrs. Warren's friends.
Well, they're both. One is
the only one, I think, in the play who's not after either Mrs. Warren or her daughter.
Yes, that's true, because he's gay, and he plays the role as he's an effete gentleman. Let's put it that way.
We don't know if he's gay.
I said he's an effete gentleman, but he's definitely not after either of them. But he definitely adores her.
Yes.
And Mark Harelick, who is after both women, is the other.
He is Sir George.
He is Sir George, and a partner in the business.
Right.
And sees Vivi
and a former client.
And a former client, and sees Vivi and falls hot and heavy for her, and maybe in for a rude awakening, which is never followed up on. I think that would have been too much for the time.
I agree, but the play to me if you compare it to something, say, like Major Barber, which covers similar ground in that, is tainted money, good, or do you reject
it? But that's tainted money from business, from big business, from war munitions.
But from war munitions,
rather than from prostitution.
But it's a different taint.
Yeah, but it's in this day and age we see that differently. But it's interesting.
I think they did in that day and age also. But the point being, there, Shaw made a lot more stronger arguments. Here, this gets old very quickly.
Well,
and there was nothing that I saw in this production that really lifted it. I enjoyed it, to an extent, but it's not one of his better plays.
No, it never was.